World News, where we talk about electric vehicles, green energy, and the stock market. Today, I have engineer Mike Herzog with me today. How's it going, Mike?
Great, David. Glad to be here.
Thanks for joining me. So I hadn't done a show the last couple of days. I was traveling down in Florida. It was kind of interesting because I saw a lot of electric cars in Florida versus being here
Mhm.
in Nebraska. Mind you, it was at a tennis tournament, and tennis people a lot of times are very early adopters of a lot of the latest tech. But I saw everything from the uh, the Kia SUV, and I saw a lot of lots of Teslas, obviously lots of Teslas, but I saw some Mercedes EVs and just a lot in general. And my first clue was usually when they drove by and I couldn't hear them. All I could
You
hear was the
can't hear them, and I always look for the exhaust pipe, and I see a car that looks like it's a little new design, and go, "Was there an exhaust on that?" And if there's no, it's like, "Ooh, wonder what that one is."
Oh, it's really interesting to see. I had a meeting with a guy who got the first Model X in Tampa that was I think it was a 2018 model.
Hmm.
And, everywhere we were going, he had all the self-driving features. He tried not touching the steering wheel for long periods of time, and it gives him that feedback to tell him
Yeah.
to do it. But it was really interesting. He had everything set up. He had a charger at his office, and he'd go running around in it. But he had different perspectives. He was like, "Look, I drive the Tesla because it's an impressive uh, technology vehicle. It's not so much because it's electric." He goes, "I really, the electric still does have its hangups, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. But it was interesting to see just his perspective on. He wishes like a gas car had all the
Yep.
capabilities that a Tesla has, and the Tesla doesn't have it because it's electric. It has those abilities because you know that's what Tesla does. Is they're real big on the technology, but
I've thought the same thing myself. I got an EV earlier this year.
mhm,
Just used one, a year or two old, and I hadn't had a new vehicle in a long time. And I
mhm,
thought, how much of this technology is because this is electric, and how much of it is because it's a new vehicle, and everything. And
right.
I gotta believe a lot of it it's electric features, that they have in there. I hope those things make it to other cars because it's neat. Beeps at me a lot, but it's a neat vehicle.
You're screwing up.
I'm
Yeah.
doing something it doesn't like. Get a lot of beeps. Yeah.
That's kind of funny. Anyways, I'm gonna shift to this article that's from Benzinga. And this one is we need to shift how transportation infrastructure is viewed to successfully transition to EVs. And it's talking about a company called Wallbox is helping to power this transition. Now, this is kind of interesting because with increased global adoption of EVs, infrastructure like gas stations is becoming outdated. This is paving the way for EV charging stations to take center stage. I kind of wonder sometimes when I go somewhere, are all the gas stations, are they all going to be EV charging stations? We're going to have a mix. You'd think that at some point soon you'd really start seeing more of a mix, especially at your nicer places like a Wawa or a Quick Trip or something like that. I just
Hmm. Hmm.
envision them starting to have a bank of charging stations there. I mean, those are obviously much nicer than your average gas station, and you could go in there, you get food, different things. There's more options there. You'd think you'd see some of that. And it's
Well, and you
now
have to imagine too. That's where those places make money. It's not on the margin on gasoline. It's on you pop in and you get a soda fountain. You get your little breakfast sandwich. You get pack of smokes. Well, not so much anymore, but things like that. Where that was been the model for a long time. So you have to
it still
imagine with
is.
yeah,
So
electric charging
if you
margins are going to be
own
even smaller. So
if
it's
you own a gas station, you make your money off of alcohol, cigarettes, and they make a fair amount off of lottery tickets. They get a very small chunk of change. Generally, it's like 3 cents a gallon for every gallon of fuel that's sold.
yeah,
And it
it's
depends on their
very small.
relationship,
Yep.
whether they're actually paying for the gas or they simply have a distribution agreement where they get the 3 cents. And when they're getting the 3 cents, the distributor tells them what price they have to sell the gas
Yep.
at. So there's some different issues with. how that plays into it.
Yeah, and you have to imagine too that in some of those places it's convenience, right? It's called a convenience store. You're stopped for gas anyway. Might as well get out of your car. You've done all of these things. Might as well pop in and get something in. As you start talking about the changing dynamics with EV charging, it's even a more captive audience.
Right.
Even if you have the superchargers, it's not a 4-minute transaction. Like filling up a tank of gas. You're at least there for 20 minutes, 30 minutes. So how do they expand on that and kind of grow that market with that infrastructure piece?
One of my friends who goes to tennis tournaments, he frequently is sending photos of things because he's bored while he's sitting charging his car. And he'll meet interesting people and have interesting discussions, and it's like, here's my new friends I met in this little town in Kansas. And some of it gets kind of funny, of what he'll send. But anyways, this article's talking about charging infrastructure by 2032 to reach $215 billion. Wow, that's 9 years, or just say 8.5 years from now. It'd be a huge charging market.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, let's see. The EV segment has now increased to 8.6% of new car sales in the US. China and the European Union have surpassed 20% EV adoption. The Nordic countries, they're all around 80% adoption.
Really?
It's really, you'd think
Wow.
those countries up there where it's really cold, but
Cold. Uh-huh.
the so we how we have the tax credit here in the United States. In a lot of those countries, they have like a 50% value added tax on
The
imports.
VAT, yeah.
Okay, and on the EVs, they're not charging the VAT. So you're basically discounting the price of the car by a third. Now, our $7,500 tax credit, and then you go to California where they have the additional tax credits, and some other states have those. If you get down like a Chevy Bolt, you're talking about almost a 40% tax,
Mm-hmm.
break
Mm-hmm.
from the government on those cars. So that's one of the reasons why you see so much EV when you go to California, for instance. The average US driver covers 37 miles daily, while an EV offers a range of 250 to 500 miles per charge. Suggests most drivers won't need daily charging, especially when a public fast charger can take up to an hour. As you've probably heard me talk about this a lot. The real problem I see in mass EV adoption are renters. When you own a house and you have a place where you
Mm-hmm.
can have your own charger, you're in a good spot. Apartments, some of them are starting to adopt chargers and add this to their mix, but it's still going to be a while before there's chargers for everybody to be able to charge overnight at home when they're renting in an apartment complex. And that's a huge percentage of
It's a big
Americans.
one. I have friends in Chicago who own a condo, part of an association there,
Hmm.
and their utilities aren't necessarily, they're sub-metered through one central meter, and then their parking garage has a meter, and it's part of their condo fees and whatever it is. But one of them, the question just came up. Somebody bought an EV and said, "Well, is it fair for them to be charging in the garage and everybody else is paying for that?" And it brought up the question of, well, do we have to start sub-metering stalls in the garage and allow these people to be able to install those things and put them in? So it just exactly like you're saying, it's this situation where I don't necessarily have control over my facilities, my utility space, and what do I do with that? And it
I,
seems pretty simple on the surface, but when you get into it, well, what do you do with that? Because that's a lot of infrastructure to put in.
I've seen a poor solution, which was to bring in a third-party provider who put in the charging stations and then charge people like a vending machine. But they were
Mm-hmm.
charging the ones I saw were charging 34 cents a kilowatt, which
Wow.
would be triple
That,
what people
yeah,
in
that
this part
doesn't
of the
help.
country would
Yeah.
expect, and it was more than double what somebody would expect in Florida. So that was eating up their savings by charging at
Yeah.
home, which is a big part of it. And so, at some point that has to get evened out a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see. This article went on to continue. Many EV owners charge their cars at home. It's simple, doesn't take time out of the day. That's going to cover most people. Department of Energy data suggests that home charging can cost as low as 4 cents per mile. That was pegging an average of 13 cents per kilowatt. worldwide. 4 cents per mile. I think most EVs get better than 3 miles per kilowatt, but that's what this one was using. I mean, I think
Mhm.
the standard is really about 4, but some of the Teslas only get about 3.5. It really varies by vehicle. And of course, the heavier the EV is, the worse that
It's
number
gonna, yep,
gets.
yep.
Yeah, public stations often have steeper rates. Well, yeah, that's a big difference. It's interesting that the experience for some is different than it is for others. But anyways, that was just kind of an
It is,
interesting
yeah. And
thing
it's,
to discuss.
in some areas like we have around here too, there's franchise laws that prevent you from reselling electricity, which is one of the issues too. And at public stations,
Oh,
it's the way around that is you pay for the time that you're sitting there. You have a half hour to charge and
you pay
whatever
for
you
parking.
consume during this time. And that increases the cost quite a bit too because that's just a mechanism you have in a lot of jurisdictions. I think most jurisdictions where that's the rule. Like a utility sells you electricity, you cannot resell that to someone else. It's a franchise effectively of what you have in that space. So it's a lot of things to contend with and moving parts and true of dang near everything around it's local. What do your local laws say? How do you do all of this? So kind of these one size fits all solutions and trying to nationalize some of this, you're going to run into a lot of local headaches and a lot of local roadblocks.
Well, my next topic today is from CNBC. Why GM is reviving the Bolt, the best-selling EV it almost discontinued. Last year, they announced, so
Shockingly,
GM,
right? Yeah.
80% of people who went from another brand to GM went there to buy the Bolt, and they decided to discontinue it. And I'm just like,
Well, I think that article answered itself in the headline, right? The most successful.
yeah, yeah,
Why wouldn't you do
yeah.
that?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm just like, I guess because they were going, the board decided they were going to fire the CEO. They don't mention that in the article, okay? But that this is how I see that having played out. GM originally planned to end Bolt production forever in December, but a recent surge in Bolt sales convinced it to overhaul the little EV instead. CEO Mary Barra said the revised Bolt will get LFP batteries, a Tesla-style charging port, and new motors and software. GM hasn't said when the new Bolt will arrive. You know, I don't like the way the Bolt looks. I never have. I personally don't like that style of car, but that's just me. And it's funny, they have one called the EUV, and I
Hmm.
haven't really figured out what that's supposed to mean. But that's electric. It's supposed to be electric
Electric
utility
utility
vehicle
vehicle.
version of the
Yeah.
Bolt. And maybe I need to go drive one, but I just haven't, you know, seen the same thing. But they surprised investors when it said in July that it'll be revamped rather than killed off at the end of 2023 as originally planned. During a GM earnings call on Tuesday, Mary Barra shared more details on the thinking behind the decision to keep the Bolt around, while giving some hints as to what Bolt fans can expect when the revamped EV goes on sale. And it's really, staggering how popular this car is that they would even consider dropping it. And my big fear is that the big three are going to get snowed under by China. China is going to bury the US automakers other than Tesla and the
Mhm.
Japanese automakers with their EVs. That's my fear. It doesn't mean it's going to happen, but that's what I fear happening.
Well, it's happening
And
in Europe right now,
it
where the
is. It
penetration of those
is.
vehicles it's there. Whereas you don't
Yeah.
see it in the United States today. It is in Europe right now, and like, I'm not going to be able to cite the article off the top of my head, but just saw something the other day where it's the big manufacturers are already, even European manufacturers are considering their space in that market because of these lower priced Chinese vehicles that are making inroads in there staggeringly.
No, it's crazy. So let's see what it's saying. By leveraging the best attributes of today's Bolt EV as well as Ultium, our latest software and NACS charging, we'll deliver an even better driving, charging, and ownership experience with a vehicle we know customers love. In the process, we are saving billions in capital and engineering expense, delivering a significant cost improvement battery pack using purchased LFP sales. It's really just nuts to think they were going to do this. The sales surge is a big part of why GM decided to keep the Bolt around. Sales were up more than 50% in 2022. And this year's sales, they were 38,000 last year. They've already sold 50,000 through the end of September this year. And here's US sales of the Bolt through as of quarter 3. And I mean, it's just
It's very,
constant.
very curious looking at that graph and why why you'd see that trend and decide not to continue it.
I don't know. I mean, you could see maybe in 2019, maybe they would have had some
Sure.
doubt
Yep.
here,
Exactly. Dropped off a little bit.
but
Yeah.
then to decide up here that we're going to change it as you know, it's more than double, what its initial year numbers were. I don't know. Sometimes it really makes me wonder what they're thinking in some of these
Mhm.
companies. I had one more little topic I wanted to get through real quick before you have to cut
Sure.
out. So this one is kind of a fun one. This one's about NASA. And as an engineer, I'm sure you'll enjoy this. NASA's Ingenuity helicopter aces longest Mars flight in 18 months. Little chopper flew 1,900 feet of ground on October 19th. Man, look at that ground. That's fascinating. That does look like dirt. Um, it's 63rd Red Planet flight. That's that's pretty cool that they're able
It's
to
pretty
keep
amazing. It's
charging it.
pretty
Yeah,
amazing. Yeah.
yeah. So they must have somebody up there to go retrieve it whenever they need it.
Yeah. they, got, they have their little machines trained to bring it back.
It's crazy to think, that we're operating devices remotely that far away.
That far away. Yeah. And with that much
I'm
accuracy
not
and that much
not sure.
ability to reuse it over and
Let's
over and
see.
over again.
It flew 2,300 feet in Flight 25 on April 8th of last year. That was the rotorcraft's single flight distance record. It's interesting to see. I wonder if they're finding anything.
I will say,
I'm
as a parent with young kids who receive drones for birthdays and holidays and things like that, at our house they have an average lifetime of about 8 minutes before they crash into a wall and do not work after that. So the fact that they're
right.
able to repeat this is pretty amazing.
I've bought plenty of cheap ones
Yeah.
for my kids years ago. The helicopter's original task was to demonstrate that powered flight is possible on Mars despite the thin atmosphere. Ingenuity did so over the course of 5 flights in the spring of 2021. NASA then granted a mission extension, which the chopper is serving as a scout for the life hunting sample collecting Perseverance. I just thought that'd be
That's
pretty
awesome.
cool
Yeah.
to talk
That's a
about.
fun one. That's a fun one.
Yeah, it is. Anyways, Mike, I know you've got to get running. I appreciate you joining me today for today's episode of EV World News.
You bet.
And as always, I will see you again next Wednesday. And anyways, everybody, appreciate you listening.